The game begins with 1 e4. And of course, Magshoodloo goes for the aggressive Sicilian. He needs to beat Nodirbek with the black pieces, and this is not going to be an easy task. Knight comes out to f3, pawn to d6. Is it going to be the Najdorf? Well, Nodirbek takes up the challenge. He plays the open Sicilian with d4. The excitement is palpable here, and we're going to have a great game because Nodirbek is a fighter, and so is Parham. You know, when Parham starts to play a game of chess, draws are thrown out of the window. He's always trying to create chances. Knight goes to c3. And I'm interested to see what will be his choice. Yes, it is the Najdorf, one of the most popular openings at top level chess. And h3 system played against it. This is very well known. It has been played by the greats like Bobby Fischer, Vishy Anand, and so many others. Knight b3. There's also the move knight e2 which is played here, but Nodirbek prefers knight b3. Bishop e7 played, and now the bishop comes out to e3. And Parham gets his bishop out to e6, and the queen comes out to f3. Now interesting choice because you can long castle and put your knight on d5. That's the plan generally. Knight bd7, and he goes g4. g5 would be quite an uncomfortable move to deal with, and so h6 is played, and now white long castles here. Nodirbek generally blitzes out his opening moves, but here he's taken some time. He's taken around 13 minutes on the clock, and now he plays his knight to d5. Parham has been pretty quick with his moves until now, but knight f8 is also part of his preparation. The knight is going to g6, and then look at these weakened dark squares slightly. Bishop d3, and the knight comes and sits on g6. So an exciting game building up. Rook h e1, because we have only one pair of pawns that have been traded until now. Knight goes back to d7. Nice move by Parham, opening up the bishop's path to g5. Nodirbek quickly plays his king to b1, and now the bishop comes to g5, offering a trade. If you take hg5 opens up the rook, and so Nodirbek waits for some time. He plays his pawn to c4, and now Parham castles it out. He's happy with his clamp on the king side on the dark squares, and he says, I'm fine with even bishop g5, hg5, and my king is pretty safe there. Knight goes to h4, attacking the queen. Takes on g5. If you take the queen, I'll take your queen as well. And so hg5 has been played, and now Nodirbek brings his queen to d3. One would see, at least on the surface, it looks like black's position is much easier to play. You will see that the dark squares are very weak, but on the other hand, white is playing on the light squares, if you see. So it's a light versus dark square strategy, and right now the d6 pawn is weak, so he defends it with rook c6, and now the queen comes back to d2. The energy with which Nodirbek plays his moves is quite amazing. You know, it's also a little bit intimidating sometimes. Knight jumps into d5 back, and now Parham plays a5. It feels like Parham is the one who's kind of calling the shots in the position. Nodirbek stops the pawn from moving forward, and now the knight jumps into f4. What is difficult here is to make progress from either side, because Nodirbek is holding his fort. He plays his rook to e3. Pawn goes to g6. Nice little move. He's coming up king g7, rook h8. Maybe the idea there. And what is Nodirbek's plan now? He goes knight back to c3. Of course, trading here is not a great idea, because then the d6 pawn is lost, then b6 is weak. So right now, knight comes out to f6, and now Nodirbek pushes his pawn to f3. You know, if there were some other players in playing this position, they would have agreed to a draw, but not Parham and Nodirbek. They are just fighting. Knight comes to d5, and now king g7 seems like the nice move. Yes, he brings his king to g7. Rook h8 is on the cards. So, h4 played here. Wow, what a move this is. And now Parham takes it. He takes this. And pawn takes Suddenly the c file has opened up. The bishop, which was sleeping here, can now go to b5. Rook comes to c8. And now Nodirbek takes on g5. Important to put your knight from d7 to c5 perhaps. But he goes knight h7 and he says, I'm taking on g5 and attacking your weaknesses. Why is this bad? Well, it's bad because perhaps the h file can be quickly cleared here. Rook h1, queen h2. Not really. Bishop a6 hitting the rook. And now, after that, rook c7 is played. And white now goes rook c1. So suddenly switches the side of the play. He sees that the queen side is actually more weak than the king side. Queen takes c1. And after knight takes on g5, he's attacking the pawn on f3. This is weak. So white now moves in queen c6, looking at b6 and d6. And then can get knight d2, knight c4 as well. Knight goes to g2. Whoa, this is getting very sharp. Rook comes to c3. And now will Parham actually go after the f3 pawn with knight e1? Yes, he does. The pawn is being attacked. Maybe Parham just gives up both these pawns and starts attacking on the king side pawns here. Knight goes to d2, defending the f3 pawn. And black now plays rook h8. Wow, the rook is entering from this side. What is Nodirbek going to do? He hits the knight. And now if you're not careful, then it can end in... By the way, a draw would be completely fine for Nodirbek. But rook h2 played and now knight f1. Attacking the rook and also the knight. What is Parham going to do? Well, he goes knight c2. If you take my rook, I take your rook. The game is heating up like anything and they are on move number 38. He brings his rook, now attacking this guy and also the knight. Where will the knight go? Well, he goes knight b4. If the queen has to move, the rook comes in. It's completely winning for black then. So, he takes the rook. Oh my goodness, he sacrifices his queen. Insane chess going on. Knight takes c6. The pawn is going to be taking the knight, and then it's just 2 steps away from queening. How do you blockade? Queen c7 would be not a great idea. The queen is not an ideal blockader of a passed pawn. So he brings his knight into the business. Knight wants to block here on c7. But the bishop goes to c4. If Nodirbek can get knight f1, knight e3, knight d5, he would be just better completely. So the knight blocks it. And maybe it's time for the knight to make the journey to the d5 square. Nodirbek comes back. We are on move number 42. Both the players have 30 minutes on the clock now. So they have plenty of time to think. Nodirbek does go knight f1. And now Parham plays queen e8. Beautiful move. Attacking here. And the idea is wherever the bishop goes, b5 or d5 to follow. So bishop d5 played. And now Parham, in order to just sort of make some progress, otherwise he'll get simply run over, plays the move b5, which is a fine move here. Now Nodirbek must take it and play rook b3. But instead he goes knight e3, which allows Parham to actually take the pawn. So materially now black not only has a queen for a rook and a bishop, but now is also a pawn up. So this is actually quite dangerous play by Nodirbek. And imagine such a crucial game from the tournament standing and we have such amazing chess. Rook c2 played. Maybe he wants to get his knight like this. It could be an idea. Not so sure. But now queen h8 trying to enter from here could be a very natural idea here for black. But Parham goes queen b8. He's entering from this side. Wow, this is amazing. Bishop c4 is the best move because you want to bring your knight to d5 square. And now will Parham push his a pawn down the board? Yes, he's pushing it. This is now, you can't take, of course it's pinned. And maybe the best move is knight d5. So good move there. If you trade the knights, then the c pawn is very powerful. So he keeps his knight on the board. He goes knight e6. And now the queen, knight and pawn can become very dangerous. A blunder here by Nodirbek. Queen a7 with the idea of queen c5 and knight d4 would be very powerful. The c pawn will fall off if queen a7 is found by Parham. He is thinking about it. This is a critical moment in the game. He has to take his time. He has 25 minutes. No, he plays knight d4. And this is also a very interesting move. But now c7 Queen h8 was prepared by Parham. He's entering here. Have to be very, very careful because queen here, knight here, pawn here. Even if white queens, it can lead to a mating attack. Rook d2, the only defensive move found by Nodirbek Abdusattorov. The queen moves in to give a check. The king has to go to a2. There's no other option for the king. And now, will the queen enter with queen c1? Yes, he plays it. The rook is attacked. If the rook moves away, there's a queen b2 mate threatened. So he goes rook h2, now threatening his own queen. What does he do? a4. If you make a queen, I take a b3, bishop b3, and I chop your queen. So he has to play g5. What a deep move this is, stopping the king from moving at any point of time. Knight goes to f3. We still have to be very, very careful here. So he goes rook to f2, rook to f2, because the rook would have been taken and there was a mate on b2, bishop b3 taken, and now knight d2. The position is equal. The threat is now to mate here with queen b1. So the rook took the knight, and now the queen takes knight. So now you have a queen against two minor pieces and pawns. If queen c1, it's most likely a draw, because here you can keep perpetual checks. But instead he goes queen a5 check. And now the bishop can come out from a4 here, or you can actually go back to b2. But if you go back to b2, then queen c5 seems to be holding the game. So he goes bishop a4. Fantastic move played here by Nodirbek. Now Parham once again in big trouble. He goes queen a6, stopping the pawn. Where's the win? You can't really jump with your knight, because then you might lose this pawn on c7. So king comes up to b4, queen b7, and now very important move is king c3, so that you are threatening bishop d7 and you are winning there by a tempo. But he goes bishop b5, and this is not the most accurate move. Now king f8 is the only move to draw. Parham needs to bring his king closer towards the c pawn. Will he find it? And there is still a possibility to keep the intrigue going on until the last round of this event if this game ends in a draw. But Parham has his hand on the king. No! He blunders with king at 7. What a tragedy here. The king is now too far away, and if white simply moves his king to c4, threatening bishop d7, then it's trouble, because there was one way. If king was on f8, you could go f6, gf6, and start pushing your g pawn down the board. But this is not going to happen with your king on h7. It's not ideally placed. Also, the f pawn can run then. So king g7, he comes back, but this is a loss of a crucial tempo. And now Nodirbek just puts his bishop on d7. He's threatening to queen. There could be a perpetual check is what Parham is banking on, but actually there is none, because after king b3, checks are very few. And so here he plays queen b7 check, king goes to c2, and in fact you have run out of all checks. He still goes queen a6, but it's time to make a queen for Nodirbek Abdusattorov. He makes a queen and now has two extra pieces on the board. Wow, what a game this is. The c pawn which Nodirbek had created by sacrificing his queen finally gets him great dividends. It's like you invest in the right things and you get big returns. Queen takes e4, and now Nodirbek finds a very nice way to finish it. A queen sacrifice. If you take it, there's knight f6 check fork, and the shake of hands